Hi guys, it's Mrs. Cotlis, and this week you should be working on your literary analysis paper. And I want to start by going over the components of a literary analysis paper because several of you have emailed me and forgotten everything you ever knew about writing papers in the history of ever. So let's start at the very beginning and let's talk through this, okay? So I'm going to do an example for you guys. My literary analysis paper is going to be on the symbolism used in Fahrenheit 451. Nobody read Fahrenheit 451 as their book of choice, and so I'm going to go ahead and use that as my example, okay? So, symbolism in Fahrenheit 451. Now, ideally, what you're going to have done is when you were reading the book, you kind of had in mind what you wanted to do, and you went through the book and you flagged examples, which is basically your evidence. So as you're going through the book, you need to be collecting evidence that's going to support your thesis, which we're going to get to. You should also have been paying attention to the general elements of the story. And when I say elements of the story, I'm talking about the plot, the characters, the conflict, the setting, the narrator, the themes, the structure, the point of view, the diction, the syntax, the imagery, the tone, any similes, metaphors, figurative language, anything like that, okay? Then what you've got to do is you've got to construct a thesis. You know how to construct a thesis. I taught you. We did it. But let's go over it just in case. So, your thesis should go along with the question that you've been asked and present something that is provable, that is thoughtful, that is not just so obvious that it leaves me going, duh. So for example, let's look at a couple of examples, okay? So your thesis is your claim about the work that you read, and it needs to be proven. Okay? It can't just be that you say this. It should be that there is evidence in the book, that there is evidence that you can get from outside sources if you need to. And most of your paper is going to be spent trying to prove this claim, okay? So it needs to be arguable. So if you did, let's just use some examples here. Okay, so if you did The Great Gatsby describes New York society in the 1920s, that's not a thesis, that's just a fact. If you did 1984 is about a dystopia, that's not a thesis, that's just a fact. If you did The Giver is about a boy named Jonas, that's not a thesis, that's just a fact. Okay? It needs to be something you can prove using the text. So Hamlet is a confusing but ultimately very well-written play is a weak thesis because it's just an opinion and you can't prove it using the text. Okay? It should be specific. So like, 1984 tells us about how people change a lot because of the government. Like it's almost there, but a lot is very vague and you need to be more specific. So good thesis statements would be things like, let's find another example. I'm having trouble of thinking all of the different thesis statements you could have here. Okay, so though Shakespeare defines Romeo and Juliet as star-crossed lovers and images of stars and planets appear throughout the play, a closer examination of that celestial imagery reveals that the stars are merely witnesses to the characters' foolish activities and not the cause themselves. Or, a bell jar is a bell-shaped glass that has three basic uses: to hold a specimen for observation, to contain gases, and to maintain a vacuum. The bell jar appears in each of these capacities in The Bell Jar, Cynthia Plath's semi-autobiographical novel, and each appearance marks a different stage in Esther's mental breakdown. Okay? All examples. So for me, my thesis is going to be that symbolism is crucial to the understanding of Fahrenheit 451 and the mental state of Montag in relationship to his society. Okay, so there's my thesis. So we've got our thesis, and then we need to come up with some arguments, okay? Some things that we're going to talk about. So if I'm going to talk about symbolism in Fahrenheit 451, I'm going to hit on a couple things. I'm going to hit on blood. I'm going to hit on the hearth and the salamander. I'm going to hit on the sieve and the sand. I'm going to hit on the phoenix. I'm going to hit on mirrors, okay? Those are my points. Those are what I'm going to talk about. And so you can't really structure your argument without your thesis, and you can't really write your thesis without structuring your argument. So you probably need to do this at the same time. There's no one specific way for how you need to structure your argument. So, for example, if you need to trace a particular image through the book, you might need to go in chronological order, okay? If you need to compare and contrast someone at the beginning of the book and the end of the book, then you're going to use compare and contrast. If you need to compare and contrast two characters, same thing, compare and contrast. So it just kind of depends. So if you need to do compare and contrast, you organize your arguments the same way you would for any other type of essay. And you can either go subject by subject or point by point. So, like if you're comparing and contrasting Jonah and the Giver, or you're comparing and contrasting Julia and Winston, then you could decide to go how they feel about the society around them, which would be a subject, or you could go point by point and you could say, Julia says, we're not dead yet, but Winston says, we are the dead. And then you could compare those 2 points, okay? But, for example, if you need to trace like Jonah or Winston's feelings about the society in which they live throughout the book, then you need to basically start at the beginning and trace with examples from the text how they feel. But you also need to, you need to have some, just like in your essays, you need to have some commentary. So I don't just want you to give me a list. Like, here's a quote from Jonah in chapter 2. Here's a quote from Jonah in chapter 5. Here's a quote from Jonah in chapter 10. The end. You need to tell me more. Why is he feeling that way? What just happened before? Why, what is the connection between what happens in chapter 1 and what happens in chapter 5? How do we get from this to this to this to this? So there needs to be some analysis happening. And same thing, if you're comparing and contrasting Winston and Julia or Jonah and the Giver, whatever, there needs to be some analysis. It can't just be she said this, he said that, boom, the end. You need to tell me what it all means, okay? So make sure that you're including analysis. Another thing you could have is a debate. So is the society depicted in 1984 or in The Giver good for its citizens? So then I'm asking you to take a stand one way or the other. And so if that's the case, then you need to pick a team, get on it, and give me analysis from the book. It can't just be your personal feelings. You need to look for evidence. So where do you see hints about how the author feels? Where do you see, where do you see examples of the government being cruel or repressive? Can you connect that to anything outside of the book? All of those kinds of things. So next we arrive at the introduction. Okay, so we've come up with how we're going to, first of all, we've picked a topic. Then we've decided what our thesis is going to be, how we're going to structure our arguments, and then we need to write an introduction. Okay, your introduction sets up your entire essay. So you need to make sure you have some kind of a attention grabber. You need to make sure that you introduce, what it is you're going to be doing. And it needs to give any necessary background, like necessary context. Not necessarily all of the background, but any necessary context. So like, what is this book? And when was it written? Who wrote it? And what genre does it belong in? Those are probably necessary context, as well as, what book are you discussing? Which characters? What topic? Okay, those things. So context, you want to let us know what book, what characters, what topic. Okay? You also want to present your thesis, and you want to answer the question, so what? Like, why does the reader want to keep reading this? Like, either you have a surprising or counterintuitive viewpoint. So, for example, is the government presented in 1984 beneficial for the people? You're going to say yes. Well, that would intrigue me. I would keep reading. Or you're going to say, this applies to your life in some way. Something to tell them why they should keep reading your paper. Okay, near the end, you want to present your actual thesis, and you want to indicate what you're going to talk about. So make sure that you list, I'm going to do bang, 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 bang. Like, these are the things I'm going to talk about. Just like in your essays, right? So in your essays, you need to catch the reader's attention, provide any necessary general background. We're going to get into some more specific background, but general background. You want to give us your thesis. You want to tell us what you're going to tell us. That's what you're going to do. Okay? Tell us why we care to read it. So those are the things that your introduction should do. You should catch my attention, tell me why it matters to me. You should give me your thesis. You should tell me the points that you're going to make and give me any general background information that I need to know. So, I am going to make a little sample of this right now. So, for my attention grabber, I'm going to go with you wake up in the middle of the night to the smell of smoke and crackling flames all around you. But you don't need to call the fire department. They're already there, and they are the ones pumping flames into your quickly disintegrating home. Why? Because you've been hiding books, and they are banned by your society. All right, so I'm going to start off with catching your attention. I'm going to use some 5 senses words. I'm going to tell you why this book is different than other books. You wake up in the middle of the night to the smell of smoke and crackling flames all around you, but you don't need to call the fire department. They're already there, and they are the ones pumping flames into your quickly disintegrating home. Why? Because you've been hiding books and they're banned by your society. Okay, that's my attention grabber. So The next thing I need to do is I need to give you a little bit of general background, my thesis, and why you care to read, okay? So, Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit, which I have to sound out every time I write it, 451, presents a 24th century society where the control of ideas and information is used to placate its citizens in a unsuccessful attempt at dominating the individual. So that gives me a little bit about background of what book I'm going to talk about. The main character, Guy Montag, feelings about the society in which he lives and its control can be followed throughout the book in the reflections of several key symbols, including, and again, I'm going to do blood, the hearth, and the salamander, the sieve in the sand, the phoenix, and mirrors. For anyone who has ever questioned the necessity of books and knowledge, this book is, I'm going to do Fahrenheit 451. Bradbury's symbolism still speaks volumes. Okay, that's my introduction. Now I'm going to go into my next section. My next section is going to be an overview of the book, okay? And what I'm going to do is, for this, I'm just going to use a generic overview that I pulled from SparkNotes. You should not do that because I will know. But because I'm trying to write this paper like live with you right now, I'm going to save a little time and be able to just put in just a general overview. So Ray Bradbury wrote Fahrenheit 451 between 1950 and 1953 in Los Angeles. The book follows Guy Montag, a fireman who burns books in a futuristic American city. In Montag's world, firemen start fires rather than putting them out, blah, 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 blah. So I'm going to give a general overview of the book. If there's anything important I need to know about when the author was writing or why the author was writing, you should include that here too, okay? So general overview of the characters, general overview of any themes that are really important. Just tell me about the book, okay? So this is going to let me know that you read the entire thing and you actually know what happens, okay? So then I'm going to go on. Throughout the story, there are several key symbols that are related to Montag's feelings about the society in which he lives. I'm going to start with blood. Okay? To begin with, blood. Blood appears throughout the novel as a symbol of human beings' repressed soul or primal instinctive self. Montag often feels his most revolutionary thoughts welling and circulating in his blood. Mildred, whose primal self has been irretrievably lost, remains unchanged when her poisoned blood is replaced with fresh, mechanically administered blood by the electric-eyed snake machine. The symbol of blood is intimately related to the snake machine. Bradbury uses the electronic device to reveal Mildred's corrupted insides and the thick sediment of the delusion, misery, and self-hatred within her. The snake is explored layer upon layer of night and stone and stagnant spring water, but its replacement of her blood could not rejuvenate her soul. Her poisoned, replaceable blood signifies the empty lifelessness of Mildred and the countless others like her. So, she quote from the book in there. There's an explanation of what it means. I could add more quotes in there, but that's an example. Okay, next, the hearth and the salamander play an important role. Bradbury uses this conjunction of images as the title of the first part of Fahrenheit 451. The hearth or fireplace is a traditional symbol of the home. The salamander is one of the official symbols of firemen, as well as the name they give to their fire trucks. Both of these symbols have to do with fire, the dominant image of Montag's life. The hearth because it contains the fire that heats a home, and the salamander because of the ancient belief that it lives in fire and is unaffected by the flames. Again, I'm going to go through, I'm going to add in some quotes from the actual text, and I'm going to be good to go. So, there is also a contradiction between the warming, life-giving fire of the hearth and the wild, or not really wild, the fire used to destroy and kill by the firemen throughout the book. Okay. Then I'm going to do the Sieve in the Sand. The title of the second part of Fahrenheit 451, and I'm going to go back to begin with blood, which opens our story. And then I'm going to connect it because now I'm going to do the different parts of the book. So, okay. To title the second part of Fahrenheit 451, The Sieve in the Sand, it's taken away from Montag's childhood memory of trying to fill a sieve with sand on the beach to get a dime from a mischievous cousin and crying at the futility of the task. He compares this memory to his attempt to read the whole Bible as quickly as possible on the subway in the hope that if he reads fast enough, some of the material will stay in his memory. Simply put, the sand is a symbol of the tangible truth Montag seeks, and the sieve of the human mind seeking a truth that remains elusive, as the metaphor suggests, impossible to grasp in any permanent way. Again, I need a quote from the book, but I've got my analysis, and I'm explaining what this all means. And I will put in this demonstrates how Guy has always been in search of truth, but it evades him. This will be critical in his decision to keep a book with him. All right. The Phoenix. Montag's society is in constant danger, and after the bombing of the city, Granger, who I'll introduce, Granger, his boss, compares mankind to a phoenix that burns itself up and then rises out of the ashes over and over again. Man's advantage is his ability to recognize when he has made a mistake, so that eventually he will learn not to make that mistake anymore. Remembering the mistakes of the past is the task Granger and his group have set for themselves. They believe that individuals are not as important as the collective and mass of culture and history. The symbol of the phoenix's rebirth refers not only to the cyclical nature of history and the collective rebirth of humankind, but also to Montag's spiritual resurrection. Now, this part, I need to go in and I need to put in some context from the book about why this conversation is important, and quotes from the actual text. Okay, mirrors. As we arrive at the end of the novel, Granger says they must build a mirror factory to take a long look at themselves. This remark recalls Montag's description of Clarisse as a mirror in The Hearth and the Salamander. Mirrors here are the symbols of self-understanding, of seeing oneself clearly. Okay, again, I'm going to put in some context. Why is it important that Clarisse was a mirror and he saw himself clearly? Why was it important that we end with the same thing that began everything? So if you've read Fahrenheit 451, Guy seeing himself mirrored from Clarisse is what sets him on this whole journey of like, there's got to be more. I've got to find more. I've got to do more. Clarisse is in the story for about a page, and then she vanishes. And she's arguably the most important character in the whole story besides Guy. And so, explain it. Okay? So, here's what we did. Ready? You wake up in the middle of the night to the smell of smoke and crackling flames all around you, but you don't need to call the fire department. They're already there, and they are the ones pumping the flames into your quickly disintegrating home. Why? Because you've been hiding books, and they are banned by your society. Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451 presents a 24th century society where the control of ideas and information is used to placate its citizens in an unsuccessful attempt at dominating the individual. The main character, Guy Montag's feelings about the society in which he lives and its control can be followed throughout the book in the reflection of several key symbols, including blood, the hearth and the salamander, the sieve and the sand, the phoenix, and mirrors. For anyone who has ever questioned the necessity of books and knowledge, Bradbury's symbolism still speaks volumes. Then I go into Ray Bradbury wrote Fahrenheit 451 between 1950 and 1953 in Los Angeles. The book follows Guy Montag, a fireman who burns books in a futuristic American city. In Montag's world, the fireman starts fires rather than putting them out. The people in this society do not read books, enjoy nature, spend time by themselves, think independently, or have meaningful conversations. Instead, they drive very fast, watch excessive amounts of television on wall-sized sets, and listen to the radio on seashell radio sets attached to their ears. So I'm going to go through the whole book. Okay, background. I get to the end of the background. And I say, so this was just an overview of the book. Any important parts, beginning, middle, and end. Throughout the story, there are several key symbols that are related to Montag's feelings about the society in which he lives. To begin with, blood, which opens our story. Blood appears throughout the novel as a symbol of human beings' repressed soul or primal instinctive self. Blah, 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 blah. Then we do the hearth and the salamander, which is the opening title of the sections of Fahrenheit 451, what it means, quote from the book, analysis about how we get to our next part, which is the sieve and the sand, which is the second section of the book, what it means, quotes from the book, how it gets us to our next section, which is going to be the phoenix, quotes from the book, what it means, how it gets us to our final section, which is mirrors, which is the end of the book. And then I'm going to put a conclusion, and my conclusion is going to be, as you can see, restatement of my thesis. By examining these 5 things, we are able to see that symbolism plays an important role in Fahrenheit 451. Most importantly, we see that Montag is an individual able to overcome the control of his society, blah, 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 blah. Okay? That's what it should look like. That's what a literary analysis looks like. There are a ton you can look up as examples online, but I literally just did that entire literary analysis in however long we've been recording this video. How long? 30 minutes. Okay? 30 minutes, and I'm talking to you. And I have a paper put together. Okay? It needs more examples from the text and everything, but you can do this. So again, introduction. Give me the synopsis of the book. Go into your points. Conclusion. Okay? You can do this. If you need me to look at a draft, I am happy to look at a draft. But make sure you're moving on this, because while I did this in 30 minutes, I was heavily plagiarizing. I stuck my entire background off of SparkNotes. You cannot do that. So it's going to take you a little longer. Plus, you need to make sure you're looking up examples from the book. You need to make sure that you've got a lot of textual evidence. And so don't leave this for the last minute. Make sure you are making progress on these literary analysis papers. And if you need help or you want me to take a look at a draft, let me know. Okay? Remember that, as always, from your introduction, I should be able to tell what your topic is, what your thesis is, and what your points are going to be. If I can't tell that from your introductory paragraph, you did it wrong, so do it again, okay? You guys are going to do great, and I look forward to reading what you write. Bye.